This week on For the Record, what a new Marquette Law School poll tells us about voter opinions.
It really is a remarkably undecided electorate right now.
And a shift in opinion on data centers. Plus,
are we going to get a deal soon?
I'm happy to meet anytime, anywhere, any place to try to find a bargain.
Where do property tax relief negotiations stand as the Assembly has adjourned for the session? And is there more work to be done?
It's offensive that we would say we're done for the year, we're going to go take a 10-month vacation.
And as Black History Month comes to a close, we're discussing local history. That's all coming up on For the Record.
Tough questions, real answers. Wisconsin's political conversations start here. This is For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Ellie La Liberté. Well, this week we're getting a better insight into where voters stand just 6 weeks out from the spring election. The headline, they're still undecided. I sat down with Marquette Law School poll director Charles Franklin to break it all down.
It really is a remarkably undecided electorate right now. 2/3 say they haven't made a decision about the Supreme Court race, but 2/3 are undecided about the gubernatorial primaries as well. And if you go back and look at earlier years, that was not nearly so high an undecided rate in February of those election years. Another way to look at it is on the Supreme Court. We ask how much have you read or heard about the election. Only 6% say they've heard a lot this year. 1 year ago in February, it was 39% that had heard a lot about the Supreme Court election.
And I want to talk about some of the numbers too, because Lazar is trailing Taylor in the polling that you found. What does that show us about how this race is shaping up so far?
Well, if 2/3 are undecided, Taylor has a 5-point lead with registered voters, but it's both of them are getting a really small share of the vote. So I don't think you want to project that this is where the race will turn out. On the other hand, Taylor has a better favorability rating, though, again, an awful lot of people don't know enough about her to have an opinion, whereas Lazar's favorability is a little bit net unfavorable. Taylor's is a little bit net favorable. These are not huge differences, but they are persistent differences in the survey.
And I want to mention now, you mentioned the gubernatorial primary, and I wanted to talk to you because, like you said, most voters still don't know who they're going to support for governor, but Hong leads the group among people who do know who they are voting for. Was that an unexpected result?
Well, she also led the poll in October when even more people hadn't made up their minds. But you got to put it in perspective. In this poll, she gets 11% of the vote, and Mandela Barnes gets 10%, and Sarah Rodriguez gets 6%. Everybody else is at 3% or below. So none of these have a meaningful lead when you think the margin of error for the primary question is about 6.4 percentage points. I think the bigger story there is Mandela Barnes is much better known than the other Democratic candidates. And when he first got in the race, there was a lot of talk about how that greater name advantage would give him a big advantage in the primary. But we're seeing really not that advantage working out with Hong at 11 and Barnes at 10. So again, an awful long ways to go on this, but at least that name ID is not translating directly into votes for Barnes at this point.
Do you think this poll tells us a lot about the Democratic primary, or is the headline just overall people don't know enough yet?
The headline is people don't know enough. The subtext, though, is with everybody at such a low percentage of support, it does mean that the field is open. If one of them can break out, can do something or take a position that captures the public's attention, there's certainly the opportunity for any of that group of 8 candidates to catch fire and get attention. And we'll see if they can do that and when that happens.
What do you make of the fact that Tom Tiffany has less name recognition than Mandela Barnes, despite the fact that Barnes ran unsuccessfully for a Senate seat in 2022?
Yeah, I think part of that is structural. U.S. members of Congress are relatively well known in their district. Tiffany's well known in the part of the state that's his 7th congressional district. But when we ask about them statewide, they're really not known outside the district.
One of the things I found the most interesting from this poll was data centers. So I want to turn now to that data. What did your poll find about data centers?
It's become quite unpopular in the state. Our question is, do you think the benefits outweigh the costs, or do you think the costs outweigh the benefits? In our October poll, the first time we'd asked about data centers, 55% said the costs outweighed the benefits. This poll, it's 70% that say the costs outweigh the benefits. So that is a remarkable change over just a few months from October till now. The other thing is, in October, there were almost no partisan differences in how people felt about data centers. It was about 55% opposed, whether you were a Republican, independent, or a Democrat. But in this poll, Republicans haven't changed. They're still at about 55. But independents are up to over 70% opposed, and Democrats are pushing 90% opposed. It's a big partisan gap, even though most Republicans, too, are opposed to it. I think the message to the proponents of data centers is they have an awful lot of messaging yet to do to convince voters that these are a good idea.
Did that partisan shift surprise you? Were you expecting that?
I was surprised in October that there was so little difference, because these days most things have a real partisan gap. But I said this is a new issue, and I think over time parties will begin to divide on the issue.
You also asked about the governor's 400-year veto, and for a little context here, that was that 2023 partial veto that allowed school districts to increase their levy limit every year for 400 years. Where do voters stand on that? Was there anything unexpected you found among GOP, independent voters?
It's almost perfectly divided, 49 to 50 on that question. But the partisan split, as you would expect, is there. It's in the 80% range of Republicans that oppose that veto, in the 80% range for Democrats who support it. But those all-important independent swing voters are also divided 50-50 on that question.
I wanted to ask, too, if this kind of adds some insight. We're going to see a constitutional amendment go to the voters in November asking if they want to. It wouldn't impact this 400-year veto, but bar the governor from creating any tax or fee with that partial veto power. Can this provide any insight to how voters will behave towards that question?
Yeah, I think it's a little early to tell. We did ask, or have asked, about whether you think the use of that veto is appropriate. Not specifically this 400-year, but just in general. For decades, governors have had this ability to do the line item, word-by-word vetoes. People are pretty skeptical of that. From the political point of view, it's probably a good issue for Republicans to put on the ballot. But when you get to whether Evers' particular use of it was appropriate or not, there we're kind of pretty much evenly divided.
That's all I have for you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Franklin also notes that in previous fall primary election cycles, voters don't start to make up their mind until late spring. You can see our full conversation at channel3000.com. And next on For the Record, we sit down with the Assembly Speaker and Minority Leader in the chamber and what they have to say about the future of that suit when we come back. Thanks for sticking with us. The Assembly wrapped up its session a week ago, but did everything get done? I sat down with the Assembly Speaker and Minority Leader to answer that question. We'll start with Speaker Robin Vos, who announced he would not be seeking re-election last week. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. Appreciate your time. So I want to get started before we kind of hop into the end of the session here and your announcement last week. I want to talk a little bit about the news of the week, which was this lawsuit against the legislature by several school districts. And I wanted to just start off by getting your reaction to that.
Well, first of all, the entire idea of suing is preposterous. I mean, in the Constitution, we are the branch that is the one tasked with appropriating taxpayer dollars. This idea that somehow that the legislature is going to be forced by the courts to spend taxpayer dollars, it goes against the idea of everything the founders intended.
And so what have conversations looked like in the legislature right now about this lawsuit? Are there plans going forward quite yet?
No, I think most of us are perplexed. We're doing everything that we can, and having the court try to inject itself, I hope they'll reject the lawsuit. We don't even know they're going to take it. But the idea of somehow saying that we're going to have a super legislature made up of, people in black robes as opposed to, a red tie doesn't make any sense.
And I want to move now to this kind of conversation of property tax, because that's obviously something, an ongoing conversation. Where does that stand?
I'm optimistic that we'll find some kind of a deal. We know that that Senate Republicans and Assembly Republicans came up with a plan. It basically funded all of Governor Evers' education wishes, but gave the rest back to taxpayers, and he doesn't want to do that. So we're going to have to find some kind of middle ground, and my hope is that we can do that.
Have you spoken to Evers since the State of the State address last week?
No, the governor was at a National Governors Association meeting last week, so we never really met with him. We did a Zoom, and then we certainly had conversations with his staffers.
Are we going to get a deal soon?
I'm happy to meet anytime, anywhere, any place to try to find a bargain. I think that hopefully people have the same goodwill to try to say, let's sit down and figure out a bargain, because I don't walk in there with any bottom lines. I hope that no one else does either, to say that no idea should be off the table until we see what everybody's perspectives are. We're not quite there yet, but hopefully we will be soon.
We heard during the State of the State address, the governor pretty adamant about that $450 million for general school aid. Why not give that to him?
Well, it's one of the things we certainly could talk about, but only if we have substantial tax relief.
Is relief in the form of rebate checks the best way to go about that?
I'm open to that. Like I think I said it to somebody else. I love cake. All cake is good. And like tax cuts, all tax cuts are good. Some are just better than others.
And now I also want to ask, too, because the governor during his State of the State address urged lawmakers to stay in Madison longer to take up more legislation. Why not stay in Madison? Why adjourn?
Well, we've always tried to draw a very bright line between the political season and the policymaking season. I think it's awful that some states you are literally in session with campaign checks flying around. We don't do that. So when the legislature adjourns, about a month occurs in the middle, and then we really begin running for re-election on tax day. So on April 15th, we are circulating nomination papers, going door to door, talking to people, recruiting candidates. So it's really, for the past ever. I mean, we've always done it this way. It's really a good break between the two, so I wanted to keep that tradition.
I want to move now to your political career. Obviously, your announcement last week that you will not be seeking re-election. I want to ask, as you look back now on your tenure in this chamber, what sticks out to you the most?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the people who I represent. I have had such a blessing to be able to meet amazing, wonderful people who I not only got to work with, but work for. That was really great. I look at some of the things that we were able to accomplish. My proudest thing, I think, is that we expanded school choice beyond the borders of Milwaukee.
Where does the state Republican Party need to go from here? You obviously a very driving force for the past 2 decades. What happens next?
Look, I'm proud to be a conservative. We need to keep fighting to make sure that we have a competitive state for Republicans. I think we're a center-right state. We're not far-right, far-left. When I look at the Democratic gubernatorial candidates, they are all going to the far-left lane. I think that's not good for their party, and it's not good for the state. So my hope is that we can show people in Wisconsin we're able to compromise.
Does your announcement kind of reflect a changing of the guard, so to speak, for the Republican Party in the state?
To some extent, yeah. I mean, I've been around a long time. I've gotten to make my chance, or my difference. I think, as I consider the way things were intended by the founders, no one was supposed to be here forever.
And as you kind of are stepping out of this role now, is there someone you'd like to see take your place?
Look, we have a lot of amazing leaders. Tyler August has been my number 2. I think he'll do an excellent job if the caucus decides to make him speaker next time.
That's all I have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us.
Appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
I just want to get started by first getting your reaction to the lawsuit against the legislature this week.
For many years, we have seen school districts across the state struggle to adequately fund our local schools and give every kid the opportunity to get a great education. I'm pleased to see that the education community, of course, is organizing and pushing back on the state legislature and making clear that it is our responsibility to fund our public schools.
What have conversations looked like between you and your colleagues on your side of the aisle, but also what have you been hearing from Republicans?
We know that many people across the state are struggling, and they have noticed that their taxes continue to go up. And frankly, I think many people are frustrated with the legislature. So in our caucus on the Democratic side, we're very clear that funding schools and lowering costs are top priorities for us. We have not, I think, seen the same commitment from our Republican colleagues, but we don't have to be done legislating yet, and we hope that we can continue conversations on these important issues.
And so the Assembly adjourned just about a week ago now, and I want to talk about some of the consequential legislation that we saw move forward, which of course was postpartum Medicaid expansion as well as Gale's Law. All of these things have been pushed forward for years. You guys have been pushing forward all this session, and I wanted to ask, what did it take to finally get this to happen?
We first proposed a bill as Democrats, I believe, 8 years ago. We pushed really hard last week and frankly refused to take no for an answer from our Republican colleagues. The way that we did that procedurally is by drafting amendments on postpartum Medicaid expansion and then Gale's Law, which expands access for women to breast cancer screenings on every bill that was going to be on the calendar. So we effectively stopped legislative business and really forced Republicans to finally bring this issue to the table, discuss it, debate it, and vote on it.
We also heard Republicans mention on the floor that bringing this up as an amendment to every single bill almost blew up negotiations.
We weren't really in negotiations on this. We've seen Republicans for many years say, of course, we're going to pass this, we'll get it done, but it didn't happen. I don't think it's a coincidence that the same day that we stopped legislative business from moving forward until we address this issue is the day that we saw it get done.
Would you consider this a bipartisan win or a win for Democrats?
We are really proud as Democrats of the role that we played in making sure that this important issue was voted on and that the bills were ultimately sent to the governor. We do not have a majority in the legislature right now, so of course it requires bipartisan votes to get bills sent to the governor, and I'm grateful that our Republican colleagues decided to join us. This is not a partisan issue to have health care for women in Wisconsin, and so we're glad that we were able to see some bipartisan work at the end.
Now, one of the other things we did not see get done during this session was any kind of property tax relief deal. That's been a big conversation, of course, between Republican leadership and the governor. Where do Democrats stand on this?
I think everyone in the state is feeling the pinch of property taxes and hearing about that from their neighbors. And so we know that this is an issue that we should be addressing at the state legislative level. Again, one of the primary drivers of property tax increases being the legislature's failure to fund our public schools, and then communities being forced to go to referendum as well. So I do hope that we will see some progress here. I think general aid funding is the best way to do that.
Are you worried there's a scenario in which nothing gets done?
Absolutely. We saw our Republican colleagues in the Assembly say that we're probably done for the session. We might come back and do some more work, but we have days scheduled until April. And frankly, I think for those Wisconsinites who are really feeling the pinch, it's offensive that we would say we're done for the year, we're going to go take a 10-month vacation. Democrats are ready to show up and do the work to make sure that we are supporting our constituents and their families, and we hope our Republican colleagues will do the same.
That's all I have for you this morning. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Those were condensed versions of both interviews. To see the full conversations, head to channel3000.com. And next on For the Record, today marks the end of Black History Month, but we're taking a look at Madison's history when we come back.
You're watching For the Record with host Ellie La Liberté.
Well, today is officially the end of Black History Month, but one Madison advocate says the reflection of history and culture should continue on. This week, we sat down with Dr. Richard Harris, whose book discusses local Black history.
The book was added to the Madison Metropolitan School District's curriculum last year, and it's called Growing Up Black in South Madison. There's four things that I want people to get from the book when we talk about economic disenfranchisement. And the first is that Black people suffer from ethnic and race discrimination. They suffered from what we call redlining, where in places in Madison, and it still exists today, they will not sell a house to a Black person. That's redlining. The third one is gentrification, and the fourth is racism. So in our letter to the mayor, we indicated that she was the mayor of a city that had a legacy of those four things, and we asked to have a meeting with her. We haven't heard from her yet. But if I were the mayor of this city, or if I were the head of the Chamber of Commerce or any business, I would be ashamed of that legacy of ethnic race discrimination, redlining, gentrification, and racism.
Obviously, this book is now a part of the curriculum in the Madison schools. Why is it important to teach about race in this manner and to talk about local history? Well,
I think the children, when they read the U.S. history of Black people in this country, they'll get a nationwide view of it, the South and discrimination, what have you. When they read my book, they'll be able to look at gentrification and redlining in this book something that they didn't know that existed.
And I want to ask, too, because in 2014, you initiated racism charges against entities like UW-Madison and others. Since then, have things changed?
No.
You don't think significantly?
Mm-mm.
What needs to happen now?
I need employment. I think we should make a decided, if you're dealing with economics, you need to have a job that pays good money so that you can, and if you have the wherewithal to do these things and you're prohibited because of the color of your skin, you're still going to be at a disadvantage. That continues with the disenfranchisement. And I don't think the city and the university have really dealt with that issue.
What does Black History Month mean for the folks living here?
Well, I think that there have just been a number of things that have changed, but a number of things that have not changed.
So you would like to see that conversation ongoing past just this 1 month a year?
Oh, yes.
That was Dr. Richard Harris with us earlier. You can see where to buy his book in our full interview on channel3000.com. For the record, we'll be back after this. Before you go, this past week was Public Schools Week in Wisconsin. Supporters of public schools from around the state, including parents, students, superintendents, and school board members, gathered at the Capitol on Friday. Advocates say the goal was to connect the dots between the needs of students and the failures of state leadership. Well, that'll do it for us this week. And a reminder, you can watch full episodes of the show as well as expanded, unedited interviews on our website at channel3000.com. Have a great rest of your weekend. For the record, I'm Ellie Law Liberté.
This has been For the Record.